Commission will come to order. We'll shortly be joined by the co-chair of the Helsinki Commission, Congressman Hastings. He's making his way over from the House side. House members always have a hard time finding their way over to the Senate side. It's a problem that we have here. I want to welcome Ambassador Chaudhry, who is with us today, the U.S. Ambassador to Moldova. It's a pleasure to have you in our committee room today, and we welcome you, Mr. Prime Minister. It's a pleasure to have you here in the United States and have you before the Helsinki Commission. And we welcome you and look forward to your testimony. This has been, in 2009 was an incredible year for Moldova. Countries always have a difficult time in an election year. And as you know, the United States will be going through its midterm congressional elections in 2010, which is always an exciting time. Well, in your country, you went through 2 elections in 2009. And the last parliament that was controlled by the Communist Party fell in 2009. So it was a dramatic year for Moldova. It has made tremendous strides to develop a much closer relationship with the European community. And that's very much noticed. And we know that you still have very significant challenges, including constitutional reform, that you are looking at. You're operating under an acting president, which is a matter that needs to be resolved, and I know that you're working very hard to deal with the governance issues and the reforms in your country to develop not only the democratic principles, but the principles that will allow for the continuity of your government. And we welcome your thoughts on how that is proceeding. Moldova is in a critical part of a region, and it is a country that we look to as a very important country, as a member of the OSCE, but as an ally of the United States in our commitments towards that region. I do want to acknowledge that this is the first hearing that the Commission has had on Moldova. And I just really want to acknowledge that. It's certainly not because of the lack of interest. As you will see when we get to the questioning time, there are a lot of issues that are important to our work in the Helsinki Commission. It's because there are so many countries, and we've never had the honor of having Prime Minister before our committee. We thank you very much for giving us the opportunity so that we could have a hearing on Moldova. It has the Parliamentary Assembly that my co-chair was the president of, devoted a lot of time to Moldova. There are a lot of issues. There's a lot of issues that are currently in regards to pros and conflicts that we hope we'll be able to get into today. So with that, we look forward to your testimony, and I will now call upon the co-chairman of the Helsinki Commission, the former president of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, my good friend, Congressman Hastings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I appreciate your convening of today's hearing. Is this microphone on? Yeah, now it is. I appreciate you convening today's hearing as part of the Helsinki Commission's ongoing monitoring of developments in the Republic of Moldova. Particularly pleased, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, to welcome you to Washington for your first visit, of which I hope will be many. But certainly since your selection in September, and as the Senator has done, I welcome you. Much of our attention following independence was focused on the continued presence of foreign troops and military equipment on Moldovan territory. The Commission itself continuously pressed for implementation of related commitments agreed to at the 1999 Istanbul OSCE Summit, and we remain steadfast in our support for core principles, including territorial integrity and sovereign equality enshrined in the Helsinki Foundation. When I was president of the Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE, I was pleased to support the work of the Assembly's parliamentary team on Moldova. As a matter of fact, a team of the Parliamentary Assembly was in Moldova just a week or so ago, and I'm familiar with all of the principles that came. It was a group of, and continues to be, fellow parliamentarians dedicated to promoting peace, stability, and the rule of law in Moldova, while encouraging dialogue across a wide spectrum of the Moldovan population. While your country, Mr. Prime Minister, has faced a myriad of external pressures over the years, our focus today is on the current political impasse following last year's parliamentary elections. And popular sentiment of change was evident last spring when thousands of Moldovans took to the streets to have their voices heard following the April balloting. Those protests attracted large numbers, and we're seeing more and more of this in a lot of our countries, of young voters that are savvy in the use of new technologies and united in their demands for change in their country. The political stalemate and the street activity that followed the spring elections led to a fresh round of parliamentary elections in late July. And the result was a coalition of opposition parties led by your Excellency's Liberal Democratic Party. The current impasse results from the inability of any party or group in Parliament, and I find this more than ironic, to muster the 61 votes required. I don't know whether there's any parallel here in the United States Senate, but there must be something about it in your Constitution to elect a new president. Meanwhile, a host of domestic issues remain largely on hold, awaiting a resolution of the deadlock, and we share that similarity as well in our country. Amid a global economic downturn, your country faces particular challenges, including a sharp reduction from remittances from relatives previously working abroad. We know that there are difficulties concerning a variety of issues. One of our colleagues, my good friend Chris Smith, a member of this commission, is particularly on the issue concerning the trafficking in women that takes place all over the world. While the United States has been supportive of Moldova's aspirations for further integration into Western organizations, especially the European Union, it's going to be up to the country's political leadership to chart a course of action that moves Moldova beyond political and economic stagnation and holds out the prospect for real change. I certainly join in welcoming you, Mr. Prime Minister, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you very much, Congressman Hastings. We'll now be pleased to hear from Prime Minister Filat. It's a pleasure to have you before our committee.
Domnilor președinți, pentru mine și colegii mei este o onoare să fiu astăzi în această sală, să comunicăm cu noastră.
Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, it's an honor for me and my colleagues to be in this chamber and to be able to have a dialogue with you.
Republica Moldova, cu adevărat, a parcurs o perioadă de timp plină de dramatism.
The Republic of Moldova has undergone recently a period of time full of dramatic developments.
Am cunoscut ceea ce înseamnă separatism.
We have learned what separatism is,
Ceea ce grevează în prezent asupra țării noastre.
which hovers over our country even as we speak.
Am simțit din plin ceea ce înseamnă dependență totală sub aspectul presiunii economice.
We have felt what the effects of economic pressures are in dependency.
A trebuit în secolul 21 să trăim sub o guvernare comunistă autoritară.
In the 21st century, we had to live under a communist authoritarian regime.
Însă, cu toate acestea, cetățenii Republicii Moldova au găsit puterea și nu numai au spus că doresc să trăiască într-o țară liberă, democratică, dar și prin acțiuni au asigurat aceste condiții.
But despite all this, the citizens of the Republic of Moldova not only said that they wish to change this and have a better life, but they have undertaken concrete steps and actions to ensure that that happens.
În alegerile din iulie 2009, cetățenii Republicii Moldova au ales între trecut și viitor.
On July 29, at the parliamentary elections, the people of Moldova chose between past and future.
Cetățenii Republicii Moldova, prin implicare, prin vot, au oferit o perspectivă țării de a reveni la normalitate, de a oferi cetățenilor drepturi, libertăți și perspectivă clară europeană.
So by a direct vote, the citizen, their vote has offered the citizens of the country the prospect of normality, the prospect for individual liberties and freedoms.
Trebuie să menționăm că am primit în administrarea țara cu un sistem politic și economic distorsionat.
We have inherited a country with a distorted political and economic systems,
asupra căruia urmează să insistăm în transformare.
which we must insist to transform.
Însă toată această perioadă de timp pe care am parcurs-o, am avut parte de sprijin din partea prietenilor, partenerilor noștri sinceri.
But along this uneasy road, we have had constant support on behalf of our friends and partners.
Și mă folosesc de această ocazie să vă mulțumim din partea din numele Guvernului, meu personal, Guvernul Statelor Unite ale Americii, inclusiv și Comitetul Helsinki pentru suportul care ne l-ați acordat în această perioadă de timp.
And I would like to avail myself of this opportunity to thank you on behalf of the government of Moldova and my own, to thank the United States government and also the Helsinki Commission for all the support.
Însă, acum noi urmează să ne concentrăm acțiunile, energia spre viitor, spre ceea ce urmează să realizăm.
But now we have to concentrate our efforts and energy for what is to follow in the future.
Urmează să facem față crizei economice,
We must face the effects of the economic crisis.
să rezolvăm problemele ce țin de criza constituțională din țara noastră.
We must settle the issues that deal with the constitutional crisis in Moldova.
Să administrăm cu mare grijă problemele ce țin de securitate,
To carefully settle and manage issues that deal with security.
ca și obiectiv în activitatea Guvernului avem păstrarea stabilității interetnice,
As an objective in our program of government, we have the maintenance of interethnic stability.
dorim să edificăm o societate bazată pe toleranță,
We want to build a society which is based on tolerance.
trebuie să menționez că incidentul din 13 decembrie este primul incident de acest gen de la proclamarea independenței.
I have to mention that the incident that took place on the 13th of December in Moldova is the first of such kind that happened in Moldova since independence.
Sau chiar dacă a fost doar unul, este mult prea mult.
But even so, it is one too many.
Guvernul a acționat prompt în acest sens
The government has acted promptly in this regard,
și vreau să vă asigur că chiar dacă avem imperfecțiune în cadrul legal,
and I want to assure you that even though we do have a number of imperfections in our legal system,
noi vom interveni pentru redeschiderea unui nou dosar penal,
we will intervene in order to launch a new investigation
pentru ca cei care s-au făcut vinovați în acest caz să fie sancționați dur.
so that those that are responsible for perpetrating this act are brought to justice,
Pentru a nu se mai repeta asemenea situații.
and that such instances do not occur again.
În același rând, Ministerul Justiției analizează și excluderea organizației Mișcarea Națională Creștină din registrul organizațiilor obștești.
At the same time, the Ministry of Justice is examining ways of excluding the new movement from the register of social movements.
Domnilor președinți, prezentarea de plină va fi repartizată în procedura stabilită.
As I'm making this remarks, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, the full testimony, written testimony will be provided to the Commission for record.
Pentru început aș vrea să închei prin a spune că Guvernul Republicii Moldova, prin programul său de activitate, urmărește edificarea unui stat de drept.
But to conclude, I would like to say that the government of the Republic of Moldova, in its program of actions, aims to build a state of law
care să ofere cetățenilor săi drepturi, libertăți și bunăstare.
which will offer its citizen rights, freedoms, and prosperity.
Și permit să vă mulțumesc încă o dată pentru această oportunitate de a fi împreună cu noastră.
And allow me once again to thank you for allowing me to be in this chambers.
Well, thank you for your comments. Your full statement will be made part of our committee record. I want to start first with your observations to us as to the likelihood of constitutional reform as it relates to a more stable government. As I understand your system, but for the fact that one term of the presidency ended and there was a vacancy, there may not have been able to get the election of a president through the parliament because of the vote threshold. It's my understanding that you're looking at constitutional changes that would allow for the popular election of the president. But I'm curious as to whether there are other fundamental changes that may be recommended in order to reinforce democratic institutions for allowing a more definitive judgment by elections.
Domnule președinte, vis-a-vis de modificările Constituției, urmează să decidem în timpul cel mai apropiat.
Mr. Chairman, as far as amending the Constitution, we are seeking to come up with a solution as soon as possible.
Sigur, situația pe care o avem la ora actuală este una care nu poate fi tolerată în continuare.
Of course, the situation we find ourselves in at the moment cannot be tolerated forever.
Avem majoritate calificată parlamentară,
Having a qualified parliamentary majority,
având acea normă constituțională care prevede alegerea președintelui Republicii Moldova cu 61 de mandate,
and having that legal norm which stipulates that the president must be elected with 61 mandates of members of parliament.
sper că nu are nicio coincidență cu situația care este la noastră.
And I hope it doesn't have any coincidences with the situation that you have to deal with.
Duce la posibilitatea de a avea 3 ori alegeri anticipate.
The situation will lead us to the instance when we will be required to have for the third time an early election.
Sigur, o perioadă atât de lungă, aflată în permanentă campanie electorală, nu oferă posibilitatea societății să se dezvolte, să-și implementeze programele în dezvoltare.
So when the society finds itself for such an extended period of time in an election campaign, it doesn't offer it the possibility to develop and to move forward.
Acum, soluția ar fi mai multe,
There are a number of solutions,
însă toate aceste soluții urmează a fi privite prin modificarea Constituției.
but all of this must be viewed through the prism of amending the Constitution.
În acest sens am solicitat asistență din partea Comisiei de la Veneția,
And to this end, we have requested assistance and expertise on behalf of the Venice Commission
în ideea de a veni cu un model recunoscut și acceptat nu doar intern, dar și din partea experților externi.
in order to identify a solution that is accepted not only and endorsed not only internally but also externally as well.
Există posibilități în a modifica Constituția și a nu genera alegeri anticipate.
There are ways to amend the Constitution without having to conduct early elections.
Însă această soluție, cum spuneam, urmează să fie acceptată și de către experți externi.
But as I mentioned, this solution must be endorsed by foreign experts.
Oricum sperăm până la sfârșitul lunii ianuarie să avem o soluție definitivată în acest sens pentru a face publică, atât pentru intern cât și pentru extern.
But we hope that by the end of the month we will have a solution identified that will be endorsed by the foreign experts and will be made public.
Clearly, you need to look at how your government is formed after a national election. And that is, I'm sure, the main energy behind looking at constitutional changes. But are there other parts of your Constitution that need to be reviewed from the point of view as you see the development of a stable democratic country?
În principiu, Constituția Republicii Moldova prevede foarte clar, prin normă, statul de drept, valori democratice.
The Constitution of the Republic of Moldova has clear provisions which provide for a state of law.
Problema nu a fost în norma constituțională, problema a fost în implementarea normei.
So the problem was not in the content of the constitutional norm, but rather in its implementation.
Și în acest sens nu a fost vorba numai de norma constituțională, în general de norma legală în Republica Moldova.
So we are not talking strictly from a legal perspective.
Norma constituțională și legală nu permite să fie arestați ilegal oameni, maltratați, omorâți,
The legal norm does not allow for the illegal arrest of people, for their mistreatment, for their dispossession of property.
Aceste lucruri s-au întâmplat în țara noastră.
Nevertheless, these things occurred in my country.
Ceea ce urmează să asigurăm un control eficient asupra implementării normei legale cu sancțiunile de rigoare față de cei care nu le respectă.
So that means that we must ensure an efficient system of control of the legal norm with concrete consequences for those who infringe that.
Pentru aceasta trebuie ca instituțiile statului să fie funcționale.
For that we need the functioning state institutions.
Mă refer la justiție, mă refer la libertatea presei.
And by this I mean the judiciary, I mean the freedom of the press.
Economia să fie liberă, că cei care pot activa liber să poată să o facă fără a fi constrânși.
And I mean freedom in economic activity, so that those who are able to exercise it can do it without any kind of intimidation.
Ce înseamnă un stat de drept?
Which basically means a state of law.
I very much appreciate in your opening statement bringing out the December Nota episode. And I want to start on a positive note, but then I want to come back to areas that concern me. On a positive note, when the menorah was taken down and vandalized, it was condemned by your governmental leaders, and we very much appreciate the leadership that was shown by the government's verbal response to what occurred. But since that condemnation, the menorah was replaced in a different location, not at Europe Square, where it was originally placed, but placed in a much less prominent location. Secondly, as you pointed out, the justice system treated it as a rather trivial issue with those who perpetrated the act. I understand you're saying now that that's going to be reviewed, and we very much want to make sure that it is reviewed. But I just want to express my concern that I believe it was not handled well with the menorah being placed back up. It was almost like the vandals won. They didn't want it in a prominent location, and it no longer was in a prominent location. And there's a second issue, and if you could respond to both, I would appreciate it, which is very much of concern to the Jewish community. And that is the International Joint Committee has invested foreign capital into a center to help the people of Moldova, the Jewish population of Moldova. And there has now been litigation to try to take over that center. And that, again, appears to many of us to be a form of anti-Semitism And if the courts condone that, it will have a chilling effect on international support to help the people of Moldova. I would appreciate your comments on both of those issues, which are very important to this commission in our continuing efforts to deal with all forms of discrimination, including anti-Semitism.
Excelență, spuneam că asemenea situație care a avut o perioadă de 13 decembrie a fost pentru prima dată în Republica Moldova.
As I mentioned in my opening remarks, this incident was the first of such kind since the independence of the Republic of Moldova.
Însă chiar dacă a fost pentru prima dată, este mult prea mult. Și insist să repet acest lucru.
And again, I insist to repeat that even though it was once, it was one too many.
Răspuns la întrebarea care ați adresat-o urmează să obținem.
We are still waiting to obtain an answer to the question that you raised.
Investigațiile urmează să-și spună, să dea rezultatul.
And the answer will come after a thorough investigation.
Eu am suficiente motive să spun că a fost o provocare.
I have sufficient reason to believe that this was a provocation
Care a avut mai degrabă obiectiv politic și nu unul care să ducă tensiune.
which had more of a political motive behind it than anything else.
Însă această situație nu modifică atitudinea care trebuie să o avem noi.
But this does not must not have any effect on the actions that we must undertake.
Spunem că imperfecțiunea legislației nu ne-a permis la acea etapă de timp să intervenim așa cum ar fi trebuit prin sancțiuni.
And the imperfections in our legislation did not allow us at that time to intervene adequately.
Am vorbit despre faptul că urmează să fie administrat acest dosar.
I have mentioned that this case will be administered again.
Dar și ajustarea normei legale în așa manieră încât aceste porniri xenofobe să fie sancționate prompt și dur.
But in parallel with this investigation, we must ensure that instances like this will bear a concrete and severe punishment.
Ceea ce ține de conflictul. De fapt, între două asociații evreiești la Chișinău.
About the second issue, it basically deals with a conflict between two Jewish organizations in Chișinău.
Sigur, în calitate de prim-ministru, ca și guvern, nu avem cum să intervenim în justiția din țara noastră.
As a government, as the head of this government, we do not have the right to intervene in the way justice works, the judicial system works.
Însă, am avut discuții cu părțile aflate în conflict.
But we have had discussions with the parties in the conflict.
Chiar în ziua de ieri am avut o întâlnire cu organizațiile, așa?
Yesterday, after I visited the Holocaust Museum, I had a meeting with the leaders of the Jewish organizations in Washington, D.C.
Au fost la această întâlnire ambele părți implicate în conflict.
Representatives of both parties involved were present at this meeting.
Am convenit că revenim la Chișinău.
We have agreed that upon our return to Chișinău,
mi-am asumat rolul de mediator.
I have undertaken the role of a mediator.
Și eu sunt sigur că vom identifica o soluție în așa manieră încât această problemă civilă între două asociații să nu continue să creeze probleme.
And we will take all necessary steps in order to make sure that this civil action does not continue to have a negative impact on the country.
Eu văd această situație de perspectivă de a fi rezolvată.
And I can see in perspective a solution being identified soon.
I appreciate your answer on both of those points. I'm we don't want to take sides on a local dispute. However, the information we have is somewhat different in regards to the community center, and we might, with your consent, make some information available to you as it relates to international norms, but not trying to interfere with legitimate local disagreements. We understand it differently than that, but we will get that information to you. Congressman Hastings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Prime Minister, first let me, that's okay if you needed to finish. I'd like to commend you on holding the event at the Holocaust Museum. I think that's a manifestation of a good spirit after the December 13th incident. And I certainly believe that it was the right thing for you to do, and I think it will resonate. Certainly it does with me, and to the extent that I can make known the fact that you did take that action and did hold the meeting with Jewish leaders, then I think that that's a step way in the right direction. Second, I'm a little bit jealous that you signed a memorandum with North Carolina. Now, I'm from Florida, and North Carolina has mountains like you do, but they don't have oranges, and they don't have an ocean like we do. No, I'm only being facetious, sir. I applaud you for that memorandum, and I do urge, however, that on some of your return visits, if possible, that you come down and see us in Florida. Tell me, Mr. Prime Minister, concerning challenging economic realities, and that's just global, but then in countries like Moldova, it's a big press down. Last week, for example, I attended the third time the elections for me in Ukraine. And undergirding all of that election was the harsh economic reality that Ukraine has faced, as Moldova has faced, as all countries in the world, not all the same way. But what do you consider the most urgent assistance for your country at this time?
Este adevărat, Republica Moldova nu este vizată doar ca problemă de criză economică propriu-zis.
Of course, the Republic of Moldova is not touched just by the effects of the economic crisis.
Economia Republicii Moldova nu a fost și nu este funcțională până în prezent și din acest motiv nu a avut cum să facă față crizei.
The thing is that
Administrarea proastă.
the Moldovan economy was underdeveloped and was not able to face adequately the crisis, also due to poor management.
La ora actuală avem o situație care oferă o platformă de dezvoltare sănătoasă economică pentru țara noastră.
Presently, we have a situation which offers a good platform for the economic development of Moldova.
Am reușit să pregătim acordul memorandum cu Fondul Monetar Internațional.
We have managed to agree with the IMF on a new program.
Pe data de 29 ianuarie, bordul Fondului Monetar Internațional urmează să ia decizie finală în acest sens.
And on January 29th, the IMF board must approve this program with Moldova.
Guvernul Republicii Moldova îndeplinit toate condițiile prevăzute de memorandum.
The government of the Republic of Moldova has fulfilled all of its commitments under this memorandum.
Ulterior acestei date vom avea un program pe parcursul a 3 ani de zile.
And after pending this approval, we will have a program of implementation for a period of 3 years.
Programul fiind asistat și de programul intern de stabilizare și relansare economică.
And this program is complementary to the program of internal stabilization and economic development of the country.
Presupune reforme profunde.
It provides for thorough economic reforms,
care presupun și costuri,
which also will bear significant costs,
inclusiv costuri sociale.
including social costs.
Acum suntem în situația în care să identificăm sursele de finanțare sau de cofinanțare pentru minimalizarea impactului asupra celor săraci din Republica Moldova vis-a-vis de aceste reforme.
So we are now in the process of seeking resources in order to minimize the impact of these reforms on the most vulnerable representatives of the Moldovan population.
I appreciate that answer. As Prime Minister, looking at your curriculum vitae and listening to your fine testimony lets me know that you're a lawyer. And Senator Cardin and I bear that same diploma. I would urge your consideration, and I listened to you very carefully on more than one occasion in this short time. You have used the fact that you and other members of your country are moving toward, as you put it, a state of law, and I have no quarrel at all with that. What I do remind all developing democracies, and I wish to make it very clear here, the United States is not finished. But all developing democracies need to know, and very occasionally, world figures, particularly in the OSCE sphere, we leave an election, and your last two elections met minimum standards, and I know that whenever an election is called, you and others are going to do everything you can to improve the overall standards for election. But an election, and this is not lecturing you, this is all comers. An election does not a democracy alone make, or standing alone, an election does not make democracy. The rule of law is fundamental, and I hear you loud and clear and applaud your efforts. And one of the things that I believe that you would benefit from is the experience of the more developed democracies in developing an independent judiciary and efforts to arbitrate the local matters. Too often, resources that are available to accomplish that are not, one, offered when people are talking about helping you toward prosperity, and number two, are not requested. And therefore, I would urge you to take my words, lawyer to lawyer, friend to friend, and make sure that along the way of the request that you rightly ask and hopefully will have provided to the extent that our country can and other countries can, that you ask them to send you assistance in developing the state of the law. And that includes, and I know a part of your background, that includes land reform, which becomes particularly critical. And understanding that you understand English, I'll just tell you, I'm from where Haiti has a large diaspora in the congressional district that I'm privileged to represent. And right now, in spite of all of this awful disaster that we are facing, and your country has faced similar circumstances, I know, it is an opportunity for them to do something that they hadn't done before, and that is land reform, so that it can be developed along the way. I don't mean that as a lecture. I mean that most sincerely, as a friend, and I know for a fact, many countries that I've been in have that ongoing problem. Now, we continue to refer, just turning to another subject, we continue to refer to areas where there are disputes, Transnistria being one, not the only one. It's interesting, I began a discussion a week ago in Syria with President Assad by asking him what he thought about Nagorno-Karabakh. And it kind of stunned him, you know, because he expected me to ask him about issues having to do with Syria and Turkey, Syria and Iran, Syria and Israel. And world leaders have views about things other than their area. And so toward that end, it is important for us to know what your view is regarding how we might assist in that resolution. But it is also important in light of the fact that you have lived that conflict, that you help us understand how we might resolve other conflicts as well. And that's the approach that I take. I hope it resonates with you, and that you know that at least the Helsinki Commission is open-minded and open-hearted when it comes to resolution of these conflicts. They're critically important. I don't mean to minimize them at all. I've worked on that one, Chechnya, South Ossetia, you name them, Kashmir. They're all over the world, and very occasionally, too occasionally, right here in America. And we tend to forget that when we go around the world talking. I don't know if there's any need for a response, but on the rule of law, I think you and I have a similar view, and I want to be able to help. Thank you very much.
Mr. Prime Minister, the Congressman Hastings mentioned the Transnistria region. I want to get to that for two reasons. It's significant because of the military presence of Russia. It's also significant because of the ethnic community that lives in that area has a relationship with Russia that at times could be of concern of whether their rights would be protected under a centralized Moldovan government. So I just really, we haven't heard much about it, I guess, of late. This has been, as Congressman Hastings said, one of the frozen conflict areas. How does that resolution fit into the priorities of your government?
Este una din prioritățile noastre de prioritate.
It's one of our priorities, the priorities of the new government.
Țara urmează a fi reintegrată pentru a-și atinge obiectivele propuse.
In order to achieve its objectives, the country must be reintegrated.
Cetățenii care locuiesc în zona transnistreană sunt cetățenii Republicii Moldova.
The citizens that live in the Transnistrian region of Moldova are citizens of the Republic of Moldova.
Și la fel cum avem și în dreapta râului Nistru cetățenii de etnie rusă, ucraineană, găgăuză, de alte naționalități.
And as similar to what we have on the right bank of the Dniester River, with people being of different ethnicity, Russian, Ukrainians,
Toți împreună suntem cetățenii Republicii Moldova, formăm statul Republica Moldova.
we are all citizens of Moldova, and we constitute the country, the Republic,
Care este o țară independentă, suverană, recunoscută.
which is an independent, sovereign, and internationally recognized state.
Și trebuie să recunoaștem a cărui drepturi suverane sunt încălcate în cazul dat. Mă refer la Transnistria.
And here we have to recognize whose actual rights are being infringed in this conflict.
Și dacă este să ne referim la situația din Transnistria, atunci, dincolo de norma națională, care nu este respectată și dreptul suveran al statului. Sunt și angajamente internaționale. V-ați referit la summitul de la Istanbul din 99.
So when we talk about the Transnistrian region, it's not only national legislation that is being infringed, it's also international obligations and commitments that are not being fulfilled. And you mentioned yourself the 1999 OSCE Istanbul documents.
Încălcare flagrantă, fără consecințe.
This is a flagrant infringement of law, but without consequences.
Și nu este vorba de lege, este vorba de angajamente internaționale asumat în cadrul summitului OSCE.
I'm talking about the international commitment undertaken at that summit.
Și mi se pare pe alocuri că abordarea vis-a-vis de această problemă este pe alocuri foarte diplomatică.
So sometimes I have the impression that the approach to this issue is more diplomatic.
Pentru că poate să se transforme în obișnuință de a nu respecta drepturile naționale, dar și angajamentele internaționale.
Because unfulfillment of international commitments, but also negligence of national legislation can become a usual practice.
I have one final question I want to ask, and it's a general question not related to the last subject exclusively, and that is, how can the OSCE help you in your priorities? And as a second question, how can the United States, what can we do here to further your efforts to strengthen the democratic and economic institutions of your government? And we'd be pleased to hear your answer.
Mr. Chairman, would you just yield to add to that as the final, whether or not the aid you're receiving now from the United States is reaching the greater development of your country? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
În primul rând, sunt obligat să spun că Statele Unite ale Americii a susținut pe toată perioada de timp al existenței statului Republica Moldova plenar procesele democratice din țara noastră.
First of all, I would like to say that since the independence of Moldova, the United States has been an avid supporter of the democratic processes in the country.
Și nu doar financiar.
And not just financial.
Am solicitat în permanență sprijinul Statelor Unite ale Americii. În continuare, cel mai mare ajutor ar fi să mențineți pe agenda priorităților Republica Moldova.
And we have had this support constantly, and we count on this support, but also our request is that the issues of my country, the Republic of Moldova, is maintained on the foreign policy agenda of the United States.
Și în mod special în problema transnistriană de a menține acea poziție pe alocuri, poate chiar și insistentă, în respectarea drepturilor noastre naționale.
And also, as far as the Transnistrian conflict settlement is concerned, we ask that you maintain your position with support to our national legislation.
Și dacă este în continuare să vorbim de situația din Transnistria, în această zonă continuă să fie încălcate flagrant drepturile cetățenești.
And we are to talk about the Transnistrian conflict. This region continues to register constant infringement of human rights and freedoms.
Și această problemă urmează a fi menținută ca și prioritate și în atenție.
And this makes this issue even more worthy of being maintained constantly on your agenda.
Și sprijinul, desigur, în efortul nostru de integrare europeană.
And of course, we need your support in our quest towards European integration.
Well, let me tell you that we very much agree with you. We will have our support on Transnistria. We consistently have supported the commitments that have been made, and we want to see them carried out. And in regards to your movement towards integration with Europe, we strongly support that efforts and will continue to do everything we can. I think Congressman Hastings' last point about how our current relationship is working is one that we welcome a continuing dialogue as to how the United States directly and through international organizations such as the OSCE can be constructive, because we very much are encouraged by what we have seen in the last several months in Moldova. And we want to see the continued development of sustainable democratic institutions. We wish you well on your constitutional reform. I am encouraged by your understanding that it requires international legitimacy as you go about developing the type of constitutional changes that would promote democratic results. It's not who wins the election, it's the people has that right to make those judgments, but you want to have a functioning national government that can govern and protect the human rights of its citizens. And I would say that you live in a very challenging region. I mean, there's strong ethnic ties to other countries that, and there's concern as to whether they're a national government. They are all Moldovan, but they are concerned as to whether they'll be treated the same if their ethnic ties maybe to Russia versus Romania. And you need to have a government that is respected for the human rights protections of all of its citizens, and you are moving in that direction. And we want to make sure that we are helpful in you achieving that. And through integration into Europe, it's going to be good for Moldova, it's going to be good for Europe, it's going to be good for the United States. So we look forward to very much working with you, and look forward to working with your delegation at the Parliamentary Assembly as we continue to find ways to work together on areas of mutual interest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
With that, the Commission will stand adjourned. Thank you.